We've had mass extinctions before, and we know about them because we can read the geologic record like a history book. In the latest issue of the journal Science, researchers lay out how life on Earth has recovered from previous mass extinctions, giving us clues as to how we might recover from our own making. Hi, it's me, and this is Minute Metaphor. When more than half of all species go extinct within a few million years, that's a mass extinction. And there have been 5 such events in Earth's history at least. We tend to think of mass extinctions as sudden, cataclysmic events, like when an asteroid killed off most of the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. But actually, they usually start with smaller changes that gradually get worse over hundreds of thousands or even millions of years. Like maybe rising sea levels flood coastal ecosystems, which kills off many shallow water-dwelling organisms. Then a few million years later, increasing dryness creates deserts where there used to be grasslands, which kills off the grazing animals that lived there. Over time, these changes compound and get worse and worse until there's a mass extinction. So for each of the big 5, scientists have identified a different combination of environmental stresses that may have triggered the mass extinction. For example, the end-Permian mass extinction, which wiped out around 90% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrates, was likely triggered by massive volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia. Those eruptions released huge amounts of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, leading to global warming and ocean acidification. But while the causes of past mass extinctions were pretty varied, the recovery was remarkably consistent. To learn about the recovery from previous mass extinctions, scientists analyzed the fossil record. They focused on 125 animal groups that include modern descendants and that had fossils present both before and after the mass extinction. For example, the ammonites, a group of extinct marine mollusks, were decimated during the end-Permian mass extinction, but their close relatives, the nautilids, survived. So the researchers used fossils to reconstruct how long it took for each of those groups to recover to 90% of their pre-extinction population size. They found that after each of the 5 mass extinctions, it took the average of 1.3 million years for life to fully recover. After the end-Permian mass extinction, for instance, it took just 400,000 years for most groups to recover, but then a few groups continued to struggle for another million years. It really varied by group. Some groups recovered quickly, some slowly, and some never got back to where they started. The researchers also reconstructed how long it took for new species to fill the roles that were left open after the mass extinctions. That metric is called the ecological opportunity, or how fast ecological roles rebounded after the mass extinctions. This metric matters because it helps scientists understand how ecosystems recover from major disruptions like mass extinctions. And they found that after 4 of the 5 mass extinctions, ecological opportunity peaked right at the beginning. All of the niches created by the mass extinction were filled by new species within 100,000 years. The exception was the end-Permian event. The researchers think that's because the ecological impact of that mass extinction was so severe that it kept ecosystems from recovering for several million years. Interestingly, the rate at which ecological roles filled up didn't depend on how hard hit each group was during the mass extinction. For example, the trilobites were decimated during the Ordovician-Silurian mass extinction, but their ecological role as bottom-dwelling, mainly non-mobile predators, was filled within 200,000 years after the extinction. Maybe that's because the traits that make an organism well-suited to fill that particular ecological role are more important than how hard that group was hit by the mass extinction. The researchers also found a pattern in the types of organisms that were able to fill the ecological roles that opened up after the mass extinctions. After a mass extinction, early recovery is dominated by small, fast-growing species. Small species require fewer resources to get started and grow quickly so they can reproduce and fill a niche before other species can outcompete them. Fast growers also tend to have short generation times, meaning that they can adapt to new conditions and make new adaptations quickly. After the mass extinctions, there was also an increase in the number of species that had shells, hard outer coverings made of calcium carbonate. Shells protect organisms from predators and help them survive in a range of environments. Researchers speculate that the post-mass extinction explosion of shelled organisms was driven by an increase in the amount of oxygen in the oceans, which made it easier for animals to form shells and thrive. Okay, now let's talk about why we should care about how life recovered from previous mass extinctions. Humans are causing the sixth mass extinction. While the causes of the ongoing mass extinction are different from past mass extinctions, studying the recovery from previous extinctions can still teach us something about what might happen next. First, we can use past extinctions to estimate how long it might take for life to recover from the current one. The researchers estimated that it would take between 2.3 and 5.8 million years for current extinction rates to return to background levels, assuming that human-caused extinctions stop today. Even if human activity continues at its current pace for 500 years, it would take an average of 1.6 million years for life to recover. The best news is that if humans stop driving extinctions today, life should recover much more quickly. Of course, there's no guarantee that life will follow the same trajectory as it did in the past, but we do know that ecological opportunity tends to favor small, fast-growing organisms and those with hard, protective shells. So we might expect to see similar organisms dominate in the near future. Second, we can use the history of life on Earth to get ideas for how to speed recovery. Perhaps one way to speed recovery is to protect and restore habitats that are home to threatened species. A recent study published in the journal PNAS found that protected areas are home to more species and more endangered species than unprotected areas. And when researchers looked at data from 615 sites in Australia, they found that protecting habitat increased species abundance by boosting birth rates while reducing the risk of local extinction. Another way we can speed up recovery is by controlling invasive species. Non-native species are responsible for more than half of all animal extinctions. So conservation efforts focused on eradicating invasive species could go a long way toward helping species recover. Finally, we can learn from the mistakes of the past. After the end-Permian mass extinction, life on Earth never fully recovered. Scientists aren't sure why, but they hypothesize that it might have had something to do with the severity of the ecological disruption caused by that mass extinction. If we can avoid making things too bad, we'll give future life a better shot at bouncing back. In the end, understanding how life has recovered from past mass extinctions gives us insight into the resilience of life itself, but it also gives us a playbook for how to protect and restore the natural world in the face of the sixth mass extinction. Thanks again to Minutiath for partnering with us on this episode. If you want to learn more about the sixth mass extinction, check out the playlist in the description. And thanks to all of you for watching.